This is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is January 15th, 2013, and I'm interviewing Jim Van Deman as part of the Oklahoma Native Artists Project, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. We're at Jim's studio in Oklahoma City, actually in Bethany. And Jim, you're a Delaware tribal member from the Anadarko area. You started out as a graphic designer, but in 1990 you turned to art full-time. Your style often alternates between impressionism and abstraction, which had you swimming against the commercial native art current for a while. But since then you've become a well-known figure on the native art scene, not just for your paintings, but also for the native flutes that you make. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks. Glad to do it.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Anadarko, graduated from high school there in 1961, which means that I grew up in Anadarko through the 50s, which was a really, really fun time. Anadarko was a really safe town at that time, and we spent a lot of time going to the theater on Saturday for 25 cents and eating 10-cent popcorn. So it was a good time in Anadarko. The Delaware tribe is one of the two Delaware tribes in the state. One of them is in Anadarko and one of them is up near Bartlesville. The Anadarko tribe has been there since 1859 or so. And the Delawares moved to the Oklahoma area in a roundabout fashion from the East Coast through Ohio, through Kansas to Anadarko, and sometime in the middle 1800s, part of the tribe split off and went to Tyler, Texas, and then came back to Anadarko, and they were known as the absentee Delawares. And that's the group that's there now, and they are now the Delaware Nation.
What did your mom do for a living?
She worked at Riverside for a number of years.
Riverside Indian School.
In Anadarko, and retired from there, and then worked in various tribal functions for the Delawares as their AOA director for a number of years, and then finally retired from that.
What about your grandparents on either side? Did you have any contact with them?
Oh yes, my grandmother is my tribal connection. She is, let's see, the great-great-granddaughter of Black Beaver, a very famous Delaware, whom both tribes, the Bartlesville tribe and the Anadarko tribe, claim relation to Black Beaver, and I'm his third great-grandson, and through my grandmother, and there is a direct historic connection to prove it.
That's cool. So you spent, so you knew your grandmother, went out and spent time at the house.
Oh yeah, she actually lived with us.
What are your earliest memories of making art?
I remember in Anadarko this guy named A.C. Blue Eagle, and there's still a guy there named Rance Hood, and those two guys were influential on my artwork in the beginning. But then I had a great opportunity with a graphics manufacturing company for about 10 years to travel all over the United States. And with that traveling, I got to visit most of the major museums east of Mississippi. Influences from Monet and Renoir, those guys. And so my artwork, even though it's abstract, is kind of loosely always based on landscapes and impressionist. They start out that way and then they end up abstract. What can I say?
Did you like to draw when you were younger? Did you experiment with art when you were younger?
I was one of those guys that drew up the margins of his books. There were like three of us in my class at Anadarko, and two of us actually grew up to be artists.
Who was the other one?
Billy Henderson.
Were any other members of your family or extended family artistic?
No.
Well, going back to your memories, I guess, of A.C. Blue Eagle, was his work some of the first native art that you saw?
Yes, and actually have a relative who was kin to Black Bear Boson too, and I saw his artwork as well. A very refined artist.
What attracted you to Blue Eagle's work or Rance Hood's work?
All the artists in Anadarko at the time were doing the flat, posterized, outlined artwork. It's become kind of characteristic of the area, and they're still doing it there. And my artwork started out being the same way. I majored in art at Southwestern in Weatherford, had a double major in fine art and commercial art. And at the time, there was just a terrific watercolor artist there, Ken Watson, and there was a terrific abstract artist there, George Calvert. And those two were very influential. I think George won because I'm doing abstracts now.
And you mentioned even in school you were drawing on your books, and you knew you were interested in art.
Well,
did you get encouragement from your teachers?
No, there was no art class, no art anything in Anadarko at the time. And understand that was probably about 1941 and 2 and 3. World War II was just over, so we were drawing airplanes and tanks.
So even up through high school, really no encouragement or anything from
let's say no opportunity.
No opportunities, yeah. Were you thinking of yourself as being an artist or wanting to?
Did I know I was going to be an artist? Yes, that's where I was headed.
Okay, at a young age.
And I happened to hit Southwestern at a really good time with the instructors there. So.
What happened when you? Well, let's talk about the base you got at Southwestern first.
I was going to say that what happened at Southwestern was in the class of '61, there was probably about 20 guys and some girls there as well. And almost all of us made art careers, which is, out of the 20 or 22, I would say probably 12 or 15 ended up being artists of one sort or another.
Yeah, it's a real tribute to the teachers. So what kinds of skills did you come away with from Southwestern?
Well, I forgot to mention Richard Tafflinger. Richard Tafflinger was the head of the art department at the time. And in his drawing classes and basic art in the first freshman year in basic art and figure drawing and the art classes, Richard taught us composition and hammered it into our heads. He was kind of an old school Italian guy, and so let's see, our education would have been formal, I guess you would say, in that you didn't get by with not paying attention to composition. And then color balance came later with George Calvert. And
were you working in acrylics at that point?
No, acrylics.
They were newer.
Acrylics, let's see, I was there 4 or 5 years, and I think 3 years, and about the third year, acrylics started showing up as a possible art form. We knew nothing about it. I was painting with oils and watercolor at the time.
Were any of your teachers interested in abstract art?
Yeah, George Calvert was an abstract artist.
Okay.
Probably more on the expressionist end of it than true non-objective abstract. But he really was the guide into color balance, where Tafflinger was teaching composition. And those two things today are the main thing, the two elements that I dwell on in my paintings, is composition and the color balance.
So you really probably hadn't been exposed to a lot of abstract art prior to Southwestern. Was that
Actually, abstract art in the 50s was kind of a popular thing, and checking out our art books from the college library, there's pretty good exposure to a lot of work. And here in later life, been accused of borrowing from Rothko a little, but that's really not true. I like Rothko's work, but my work quite a bit different.
So after college, what happened? You had your double major.
What happened is I got married and we had a baby and we moved to Oklahoma City and I began work for a company called Central Sales Promotion. That's a screen printing company. And they had a department of production artists, of which I was one. And I worked in that capacity for 6 or 7 years, and then as a designer for the company. We had, with my own set of accounts, that I was designing store trims for, seasonal store trims and interior things.
Were you also like painting, doing artwork on the side?
The Oklahoma Art Guild, I've got involved with them in about '67, and they kept the fine art side of me going. And yeah, so I was never that far from being into fine arts.
So they would have shows and...
Yeah. Monthly meetings, and mostly at the time we were all Sunday painters. And so, but we'd have 2 or 3 big shows a year.
Well, was Bert Seaborn a member of that
Yes.
guild? Is that how you first became acquainted with him?
Yes, I've known Bert since '67, '68, sometime back then.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you met?
Well, when I met Bert, he was still working for the ONG, I think, and I don't know what his job was with ONG, but he might have been an art director or something
Yes.
for them. And anyway, he, a nice guy, known him for years. Admire his work.
And like you said, both of you having to sort of do other things to support yourselves, but but wanting to do more painting. Did you get anything from the job, any kinds of skills that you think later on would manifest themselves in your art when you began painting full time?
Probably the influence from the Art Guild and being around other artists. Art Guild had about 100, pretty close to 100 members at the time. I don't know what it has now, but back then it was between 80 and 100 members. And you know, the conversations were about art, doing art, and we actually were doing art. I've gone through the phases from really tight landscapes through impressionist landscapes, and then finally settling on abstract art. It took me a while to realize that not everybody can do an abstract painting.
Right.
In the Art Guild, one year I had the opportunity to do a workshop, and I had 16 people sign up for it, and it was a week long, and of the 16 people, 2 understood the process, my process of doing abstract art, and that is that you've got this big blank canvas and you approach it with a blank mind. You don't worry about what goes on the canvas. You just start it off and it ends up. And I will say that I think there were 2 guys in there, the rest of them were ladies, and almost all of them needed something to think about before they started on the canvas. I never actually ever worried about that.
And what year was this?
Oh gosh, that's been probably 30 years ago.
Did you also take workshops when you were a member of the guild?
Yes, in fact I took one from Mike Larson, I took one from Diane Ainsworth McDonald, I think was her name, I can't think of her last name. I took one in Taos from William Hook, who's a very well-known acrylic painter. He and I have 2 totally different styles. I took it to see if I could pick up any acrylic painting secrets from it, and sure enough, there are none. I knew probably a few, and he knew a few, and so it wasn't my idea to go in and emulate his work. It was just mainly try to advance in acrylic painting as a media.
You mentioned Diane Ainsworth McDonald as an influence. What kinds of things did you draw from her?
Diane is from, is her last name McDonald? Do you know her?
No, I researched her for your interview. I think it's Ainsworth McDonald.
Okay, I thought it was, but it's been a while since I've thought about her. She's from Taos and a really skilled Impressionist landscape painter. I still like it, Impressionist landscape painting, and I still dabble around in it. But as far as showing my artwork, like with Red Earth and in galleries, it's going to be abstracts.
Mm-hmm. So you did have the opportunity when you were traveling, as you mentioned, to see a lot of artwork. Can you sort of describe for us maybe one of those pivotal
Yes, it was.
moments?
It was arrogance at its highest form. Monet, I caught a Monet show at the Chicago Art Institute. It was the traveling show, and I happened to be in town at the same time that the show was there. And so there was like huge rooms just full of Monet paintings, and one wall, there was 180 haystacks on one wall that he had painted during different times of the day to, I guess, get the light right. And so I'm standing looking at one of his pieces thinking, I can do that. Of course, there's no way in the world I could do that, but that's really kind of what got me started painting. And I'll say this about Monet and Renoir and all those Impressionist paintings. When you're looking at them in a museum as opposed to looking at them in a book, they're two totally different things. The colors are alive in the museum, especially a Renoir piece.
Did it open up? Had you done a lot of plein air painting? Did that become an interest of yours for a while?
Plein air painting took a nosedive in Sedona. I set up out there. One time my wife and I were vacationing there, and I set everything up, squirted my paint out on the palette, turned around, adjusted my canvas, turned back around, and all the paint was dry. So it was like you had to work it like a watercolor. Your paint had to be thin, water thin, and you got it on canvas and then finished up later. And I would assume plein air painting with acrylics would be that way. I don't do it.
So this
I don't
was
do it anymore.
what year that you sort of tried that? Do you remember?
Oh, that was probably in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Probably about 88, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm. So in 1990, you decided to go full-time with your art. What sort of brought that decision on?
I resigned from the graphic arts company I was working for, the manufacturers, and worked around for a couple of years trying to get something going, and nothing got going. And so I just leaned back on what I knew and started painting full-time. I was lucky enough to draw a gallery in north of Scottsdale in the Boulders, and it was just a tremendous gallery. And over the 14 years that I was there, we sold lots of artwork.
What was the name of the gallery?
Es Posible. It's possible. And it was owned by June Gillum, a woman from Stillwater. Do you know June?
I don't.
No. Need to meet her.
So did you just walk in with some paintings one day? How did
She
that?
picked me up at Red Earth. Actually, she was coming through the Red Earth show. I've been in Red Earth shows for 15 years. And she came through one year and liked my artwork, so we had a business relationship for quite a number of years.
That's wonderful. So did she do any solo shows for you, or?
No, but within the gallery was huge, and there was one room that they called the Van Deman room because it was all my work.
That's great.
That was one of the highlights of my career. Oh, and one of the other highlights is out of that, I got an 8-foot by 8-foot commission to go in a 8,000 square foot home up in the Boulders. That was quite a deal.
Yes, wonderful commission. So you did your first Red Earth show in 1990, actually, the first year that you started painting full time?
Probably so. That's probably about right.
So how was the show for you? Were you
And that's probably about 95 or
About
6.
95, okay. So you had attended the show a little bit
Oh, yeah.
previous.
I don't know.
previous to that.
They celebrated an anniversary just recently, but I don't know which one. Was it 25? Yeah, I think I was
maybe.
at the first one downtown.
Mm-hmm. At the Marriott Center. What was your reception like the first time you did the first Red Earth show?
Better than you might think for abstracts. I also had some pretty interesting looking, I think, expressionist pieces there, which were animals that were, I had a series of paintings of birds dressed like Indians instead of Indians dressed like birds. And one of those sold, it was about a $3,700 painting, first or second year, I can't remember. Kind of boosted my ego a little bit for being in those shows.
Did you have a title for it? Was it a series sort of?
I think
per se?
I just called it The Birds.
Uh-huh.
And it was actually birds dressed in Native American regalia.
Right. Sounds interesting.
I'd like to see that painting again.
When did you enter your first competitive show?
Probably in 1990. There used to be a show, and may still be, down at McAllister. And the pieces I took there were all Anadarko style artwork pieces.
That is to say, you're saying flat style?
Yep.
Traditional,
On illustration board.
quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Using, I was trying to think of the type. They're not gouache, well, they're kind of like gouache paints, which is a flat, more like egg temper actually. There's a company called Pelican that made a group of colors called designer colors, and that's what I painted with. And there was I probably had, I don't know, 10 or 12 pieces, sold about half of them.
Wow.
Of course, I was getting like $50 a painting back then too. So a little different now.
But still, that's, when you're able to sell flat style, but then you sort of take this chance on going a different direction.
You asked me about workshops. I had a workshop with Doc Tate in Ivaquoia. And Doc Tate is the one that got me out of that style because he did demonstration. That one went for 3 or 4 days too, or evenings, and it was at Putnam City. And with his demos when he did them, he would go through everything that you'd need to do, and it all had to be real and it all had to be traditional. I don't know any of that stuff. I just make them up as I go along, and so I got out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of those artists like Rance Hood and Doc Tate and Black Bear Boson and all those other guys, AC, really did concentrate on the traditional side of stuff. They knew what went in all the dance regalia and what went on the horses and what kind of spear he was carrying, and the feathered staff had to be just exactly right. And I don't know that stuff.
They were focused on the cultural content.
Mm-hmm,
but,
exactly.
Yeah. Did you ever do the Untitled show?
No. I have an invitation laying on my desk at home now for it. I'm not going to do it this year either.
What about an early award that was important to you?
One year I won Best of Show at the Art Guild show, the main one for the year. And then I've won several awards for Red Earth. One of them on a flute that I made, which, by the way, was stolen 2 weeks before Christmas from Red Earth gift shop.
Oh.
So it's gone. But anyway, that was probably among my flutes, my masterpiece.
Heartbreaking.
Sort of. Well, it's like, let's see, D.G. Smalling. We were at a get-together a week or so ago, and he said, you've reached a plateau when you're an artist and some of your work has been stolen.
That's a kind of ironic recognition, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think you also had a gallery in Sedona, Goldenstein's gallery.
Yeah, Goldenstein. Yeah, Goldenstein. Goldenstein, and it's probably the best gallery in Sedona. But Sedona's a tourist town and not an art town. People do not buy big paintings and carry them around. So I was there for 4 years, and we pulled out.
Mm-hmm.
I say we, that my partner and I, Dolores,
Right.
my wife.
Right. What was enjoyable about that show the first time you went out there?
In Sedona. Being in Sedona, you've been there. It's a beautiful place.
Uh-huh.
Every direction you look is a vista, and being in the best gallery in town too was pretty cool. When Jean Gillum closed the gallery in the Boulders, she set all of the artists up that were with her in that gallery up in Sedona. We had our choice of about 2 or 3 different galleries. She did her homework, and she's a beautiful lady. Anyway, I chose the Goldenstein Gallery, and it just, really didn't work out.
Right. What aspects of the art business did you find especially challenging when you started full-time?
People turning loose of big money. It's fun. It's a funny thing, but you can hold a painting for 2 years, and then all of a sudden somebody will come along and buy it. It's not that people don't like it. It's just it's got to be the right person for a particular painting. The economy plays a role in whether artwork sells or not, as well. Expendable cash, I would guess, or something.
Right. Did you notice, because for example in the Sedona Gallery, I know they had the Cowboys and Indians show, and then did you notice a difference in the pricing structure between like native art and Western art?
Not so much between, say, Sedona and the gallery, exclusively in the Boulders. The pricing was pretty much the same there. Here, between there and here, the pricing is different. You have to lower the prices here in Oklahoma somewhat.
What changes have you observed in the native art landscape since the 90s?
There are more guys doing abstract artwork than there was when I started, and I'm proud of them for pursuing it. They're always, even when I first started, there were a couple of guys, and I can't think of their names right offhand, that were major abstract artists, Native American abstract artists. Fritz Shoulder, to start off with one, and I believe Nieto.
John Nieto.
Yeah, I was doing coyotes and buffaloes,
Right.
in odd colors. I wouldn't call them abstracts, particularly more expressionist works, but.
Right. Do you get to interact with some of the other abstract artists these days at shows, or?
Being an older guy at the show now, yeah, the young ones will come around and talk to me, so I kind of like that.
What role does your wife play in the art business?
Supporting me, and she's one of my biggest fans, and so that helps.
It does. It's kind of a lonely business sometimes. When did you first become interested in native flute?
I don't know when I made the first flute, but I can tell you I've made about 120 of them since I first started. If I can, I'll just reach right here and grab one. This flute is not a copy, but a representation of flutes from the Anadarko area in the early 1900s. Now, as I get my flute history from a guy named Doc Payne, who died several years ago, but Doc Payne was a flute collector and a flute expert, is that flutes really in this style don't go back much past 1850. There are some ancient Anasazi flutes, but they're not this type of flute. A guy named Coyote Old Man, his name is Michael Allen, says that he's the first guy that put a pentatonic minor scale to a flute, to a Native American flute, and he may be, and that happened in the early 60s. And flutes are very basic. Start at one end, 5 notes, and there's 6 with an octave. So this one is one piece. A lot of flutes are in 2 pieces where there's a seam and they're glued. This one's bored from each end and then finished from there. A guy named Bilo Kozad from Anadarko was producing a short big bore flute similar to this one. And so this flute's kind of styled after his flutes. I don't think the Kozad flute had an actual scale. It had a scale, but it wasn't a Western scale or Western music scale that we're used to hearing. So probably if we heard him play it, it would be a little dissonant.
That's beautiful. Wood. What kind of wood
this
is it?
This piece right here is actually from Gary, Oklahoma. It's a giant red cedar.
Cedar, yeah. Were you aware of Woodrow Haney's work with flutes or Doc Tate's work with flutes?
Doc Tate's, yes. Woodrow, not so much.
Did you and Doc visit a little bit about flutes when you...
Actually, by the time I got to flutes, the Doc was gone. So I do have some of his CDs and recorded music by he and his sons. And I have a fairly good collection of flute music on CD.
Oh, that's neat. So when you started making flutes, why don't you take us through the process of making your first one?
I've got the first one.
Here.
It's right here.
All right.
This is prototype 001. And it's not in a pentatonic minor scale. And so from there I actually worked out the pentatonic minor scale for myself. And then I met Dr. Payne. I can't remember his first name. I think Richard. And he said, "That's pentatonic minor." And I'm going, okay. And the first flute I made.
So was it an accidental discovery, or you really worked? Okay.
It was accidental in that I was shooting for the way I heard the flutes being played on CD at the time. Who was that first guy? I think it was in the Nieto, wasn't it?
Well, Nakai, are you talking about Carlos Nakai?
Nakai. Carlos Nakai. And I wanted my flute to sound like his flute. And so it was just my ear adapting that scale. I knew nothing about a pentatonic minor scale at the time. I know a lot about it now, but not then. Anyway, just that's the way it developed.
Right.
By ear and drilling holes until I got them in the right place.
Right. So your first flute, which sounds like a native flute that we're used to hearing, when you learned to play, did you learn to play a number of different songs from the area, or did you sort of start creating your own songs?
I never really thought about those songs being actual songs because they're from the 1850s. I just thought you picked up a flute and played what I call flute licks. You listen to Carlos Nakai, and there are certain things that he does in a song to get the song to start in one place and end up another.
Right.
And so, to me, they're just kind of flute licks, and so you just string all these flute licks together and you got a song.
So there wasn't anybody you knew either in the area that knew about Delaware flute songs or anything?
As far as I know, I'm the only Delaware flute guy there is.
Okay.
So I do not know if there are any more flute makers or not. I don't think so.
Right.
Most of the flute players in Oklahoma are Comanches and Kiowas, maybe Plains tribe guys.
Right. So when you developed the pentatonic minor,
it's a 5-note scale.
A 5-note scale.
That's what penta.
What kinds of possibilities did that open up?
Well, every flute I've made since I developed the scale has been a pentatonic minor, and almost all flutes, I can't say all flutes because Tommy Ware from Anadarko is a flute player, and he plays a diatonic. That's a chromatic scale flute. And the way I can say about that is, if you're going to play Amazing Grace, you need a pentatonic flute because it's difficult to play. A diatonic flute because it's difficult to play on a pentatonic flute.
Mm.
And Tommy plays a lot of Amazing Grace at a lot of funerals, so he plays a diatonic flute.
Did you have a music background at all before
Yes.
you started? Oh, you did. Okay.
I started playing trumpet in 4th grade and played all the way through 3 years of college, so I was well based in music. And then I got married, and the trumpet went by the wayside, and I picked up guitar, and I've been playing guitar for quite a number of years. I ought to be a lot better than what I am.
And making some instruments too,
Yes.
which I'd like to talk about a little bit. But first, let me ask you: so, do you ever perform on the flute, or do you just play for yourself? You're more interested in creating them.
On occasion, I'm more interested in creating and playing them for myself. On occasion, I have performed with other players. It always makes me a little nervous.
So, you've also experimented with some other artistic. They're both artistic creations and instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you kind of talk about those
Well,
a bit?
I got into cigar box guitars quite a number of years ago too. I've made about 60 of those. And recently I gave one to Kyle Dillingham. Do you know Kyle? He's a well-known Oklahoma fiddle player. And so he and I see each other on occasion, and I made one for him, and I don't know whether it'll show up in his work or not. They play pretty well.
Well, yeah, because I was wondering, is your primary interest the sound that they have,
Yes.
or is it sort of the look to them?
Here's how they look, and here's how they sound.
That sounds very nice.
So it's really not a kid toy. I think it's got a great sound,
Right.
and it has possibilities. Most of them are electric. They'll plug right into an amp.
Does the sound, if you have the same size box, is it pretty much the same sound, or does it really
No,
vary
the box,
based on?
they vary. In fact, they vary even if you have the same size box. Every one of them is different. They all
So
sound.
they all have a unique voice.
Yep, a unique voice is a good way to put it.
How did you get the idea to do that?
I think I might have picked up off the internet, but at the time there wasn't much there. Now, these days, there's everything you need to know about a flute, and there's everything that you need to know about cigar box instruments on the internet. My latest I don't have here, I wish I did, is a Taos hand drum that has a banjo neck on it.
Oh, wow.
And it sounds terrific. I wish I had it here to play it for you.
That sounds really interesting. Yeah, and basically when you were experimenting with the flute the first time, it was truly, you were sort of reinventing the wheel, trying to figure out how to make your first flute. Is that right?
Yes. I bought a flute from a guy named Billy Wells in Edmond, and his flute is sort of in a pentatonic minor scale, but it's off. There are several notes that are quite a bit flat, but it's very there's a song in every flute, no matter how it's tuned. I mean, you could take a hollow tube and get it to blow like a flute, poke holes in it, and you can play a song. So I'm not much of a stickler on it being tuned to perfection. And anyway, Billy Wells built a beautiful flute, and I didn't necessarily copy it. In fact, I didn't copy it at all. I just I worked from it, listening to it, and Carlos Nakai's CDs, and that's how it came. I forgot about Billy's flute a while ago, or I would have mentioned it.
You had a two-person show at Red Earth in 2011 with Lisa Rutherford, is that right? The potter.
Yes.
How many paintings did you put into the show?
About 12.
Were they all new pieces or?
They were all new and some that have been around to other shows.
Yeah. What are the benefits of being able to sort of do a two-person show like that?
The benefits is I sold one piece and picked up 2 commissions out of the show. So that was a pretty good deal. And we had a very, very nice turnout for the reception. I was real pleased with the Red Earth management and what they did for the show.
Oh, great. How important are commissions to your work? How much of a percentage of your income are commissions?
These days, not so much as say 10 years ago. I've got 2 that I should be working on right now, and will be starting tomorrow. So,
are they from a previous show last year, or?
Actually, one is a true commission, and the other one is from friends. I don't, is a friend really a commission? Or is I don't know how you look at that, but it's money. So,
have you taught? You mentioned the one class that you taught for the Guild, but have you taught any other classes or workshops, either in painting or instrument making?
No.
Any interest?
Not in years. Actually, being in this studio here, I'm pretty isolated, and I rarely see people or talk to people. I belong to a club, a radio control flying club at Yukon, and so I see those guys like once a week or 2 weeks. But other than that, I don't see many people here, unless I'm doing a show like Red Earth, which is nonstop talking for 3 days. And so it's kind of an interesting existence.
And you mentioned you'd had this studio for here in Bethany for
14, 15 years. I've been here for a long time.
Yeah. What project are you working on now that you're especially excited about?
Well, I'm pretty excited about the 2 commissions and the hand drum banjo. I've got 4 hoops back there and the rawhide, and I'm gonna, instead of using a drum from the Taos Drum Company, I'm gonna make my own. And I'd like to get the head a little tighter than what's on the Taos drum. So that interests me greatly. I'm going to get on those. So I hope to have about 3 of them for the Red Earth show.
For Red Earth, yeah. And that's still your
now, this is
principal booth show.
In that Red Earth likes them. I thought the management there would go, yeah, what connection do Native Americans have with banjos anyway? But I get such a positive response from them that they're glad to have me show them.
Right, they're unique. Let's talk about your techniques and process a bit. In terms of paintings, you no longer work in oils and watercolors. It's primarily acrylics.
It is 100% acrylic. And I use a lot of pure colors. They're all layered many times with thin washes. And rather than, well, I do mix a lot of colors on the palette and mix them up in jars ahead of time. But I'm kind of guilty of using colors straight out of the tube too, because they're so close to bead colors. A lot of my abstract work is based on bead colors and blanket colors, and those blanket combinations of colors, and like the Kiowa Sunburst, which is used a lot in their necklaces, that starts with white, yellow, orange, red, and blue, I think, in those colors both directions. So you'll find that a lot in my work if you look close enough.
So rather than when you're looking at a blank canvas, rather than approaching it with a composition in mind from the start, you have this repertory of colors that you know are going to come into play.
Actually, I start with 2 colors on a canvas, and that is raw sienna and Prussian blue in the Liquitex color. Those two, when you mix them together, can go all the way from a cool color to a warm color. And use them really thin, you get kind of all the way from brown through green to blue. And so those go up on the canvas with a white brush, and we just kind of wash it up there, paying attention to the golden mean, if I remember this correctly. There's 4 points on your canvas where you want your center of composition to be. And so I'll work around one of those 4 points and just keep the color coming up until I go, it needs this here and it needs that there. Actually, it's a feedback from the canvas telling me what it needs. And that's about the best I can do with that.
Do you work straight through, or do you like to let canvases sit in various stages?
Since I'm working, I'll get it going, and I can get a canvas pretty well done in about 3 hours, but then it might take 2 or 3 weeks to finish it because of the thin overlays or thin washes. If you put a thin wash on, you can't go back in say 10 or 15 minutes on top of it, or you'll work right, the water will re-wet it and open it up. So it has to sit for a day or two, and then you can go back and work on top of it. So sometimes they stretch out for weeks until I get them to where I like them.
Do you give titles to your paintings?
Funny thing about titles, they'll get a title, and then they'll go to a show, and I'll forget what the title was, so they get renamed for the next show. And so unless I've got it written on the back, and sometimes I do. So yeah, titles are kind of important. And I've gone through everything from titling it to what it looks like, to titling it to what it doesn't look like. I had 2 paintings, one of them named Not Sedona and one of them named Not Santa Fe. So I titled them what they're not. And then I went into cyber titles with dots for a while. And now I'm back to maybe opening a dictionary and pointing a finger and saying, aha. I've done that for titles.
Why are titles important?
I've often wondered that. You see a lot of paintings untitled. I don't like that either. So I think it should have some title, and maybe it should relate to the painting or not. Maybe it should be, obverse to the painting.
Is it more an expectation that both the artist has and the spectator or the viewer has?
It's more of an expectation of a client or a viewer.
Yeah.
That a painting should have a name.
Yeah.
Well, you go into museums and all paintings are named, even if it is Untitled One.
As an abstract artist, or even when you're approaching something impressionistically, what role then does sketching play in your work?
Actually, the wash is the sketch. I used to do a lot of sketching in books, and I still do that occasionally, but only if I have a character or something in mind that's going to go on the canvas. Otherwise, the wash is the sketch.
So, for example, I saw a few nice crow paintings in here, so you would, those
this one
would
back
be
here was very specific,
a sketch in a
went
book
through several
first.
sketches till I got the crow looking like an actual crow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you keep a notebook of ideas or titles?
I did, not much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You reach a certain point where you kind of know what's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
There are some watercolor artists. Ken Watson was one, and I can't think of his name. Anyway, they'll prep their paper, and those guys know exactly what's going to happen when they touch the brush to the paper. And so, in 45 minutes, they have a finished piece because they knew from the very beginning what it was going to be. It's not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily happen with me.
What kinds of research do you do for your paintings?
In the beginning, I did a lot of research on the Delaware tribe, and it's in the various aspects of it since they came to Oklahoma and before. And in not most. I'd say a lot. I do some abstracts that are just kind of mainstream abstracts, but then I also do a series, usually for Ritter, that will be based on spirituality. There will be spirit characters floating through the abstract somewhere if you look close enough. I'm kind of fascinated with a character called the Missing. It's, with the Delawares, it was a animal spirit, like this guy back here could be a Missing crow.
Mm-hmm. So you've been exploring that theme a little bit the last...
Even in writing, I've been doing some writing lately, so the characters show up in my stories.
It's interesting. How did you come up with your signature?
It's funny because our instructors in college had us work on signatures, and so that's I have two. I have one that's script, and then I have one that goes on the paintings.
When you say script, that's just
like signing my check.
Oh, I see. Okay, but yeah, it's an art sort of.
Yeah, well, when you have a name like Van Deman, it kind of opens up some possibilities too. So. Well, with a capital V and a capital D, with the letters in between it works out. I think it's a decent looking signature.
I do too. So, in terms of your creative production, how much is focused on painting and how much is focused on producing instruments?
Lately, it's been mostly instruments and less painting because my interest kind of isn't there right now. But with the commissions and I've been contacted by a designer back in the Boulders again in Arizona, and so painting may take precedence again. It'd be kind of nice if it did.
Right.
But I really enjoy making the banjos right now, and the drum banjos, my new baby. So
yeah.
and I have to make more flutes too. So I stay busy.
You don't have time to try your hand at sculpture or anything.
That's sculpture with me. I like sculpture, and I can do sculpture, and I had a lot of classes in sculpture. But it's a way not to paint. I can work 6 hours on a sculpture, and I'm not going to do anything with it when I could have been working 6 hours on a painting that I know is going to go in a show or be sold. So it's kind of the way I look at it.
Are you still involved with the art guild, or is it
No, I've been out of the
longer?
art guild for a number of years. No reason why, just kind of drifted away.
You do go visit your mom in Anadarko once a month.
Yes.
I mean, once a week, isn't it?
Yeah, once a week.
Sorry.
My mother's 90, and she says she's the oldest living Delaware, and I don't doubt it. She probably is. There was a 93 or 94-year-old in California, but she died not too long ago. So if she's not the oldest Delaware, then she's right next to the oldest Delaware.
So does making that trip landscape-wise, is that sort of keep you grounded too?
I actually enjoy driving that. It's right through territory I grew up in. Drive across H.E. Bailey through Chickasha, from Chickasha to Verdon, from Verdon to Anadarko. And it's kind of interesting territory there. A lot of history, and I like it. Yeah. I like Anadarko. It's a pretty cool town.
Take us through your creative process, if you would, from the time that you first get an idea for something.
Okay, that could be an idea for banjo, an idea for flute, an idea for a story, or an idea for a painting, and they all just seem to pop into my head. So I can. It's hard to say about that. I think that's part of being an artist. I don't know. I know that not everybody can do it that way. It's just.
Yeah, and switching back and forth from media, is it just whatever grabs you on that particular day, sort of?
Mm-hmm. Well, with the banjos, they're pretty much, it's kind of a linear thing. You start at one end and you end up another, and with all these boxes in between. So the boxes themselves kind of dictate what happens to a banjo. With the flutes, I settled on a style which I'm going to back off on. I really like the big bore flutes, but they're really difficult to make and difficult to tune. So I'm going to go back to a smaller bore flute, which is what you hear on the CDs. Carlos Kai plays probably a 7/8 inch F flute, and those are the most popular. And that's probably what I'm going to be making again. The flute that was in the Red Earth Museum that got stolen was an oval flute, and I like the oval flutes too, so I'll probably go back to making some of those. Rather than being round, they're kind of that shape.
I meant to ask you too, do you order your cigar boxes or do you find them? Or?
There are two cigar box stores in Oklahoma City, and the last raid I made on them, I got about 120 boxes, so I'm good for a while.
What do you?
And they're $1 a piece.
You don't have to take the cigars; you can just buy the boxes.
Right. I'm not a smoker. Never have been.
So, what's your creative routine?
Creative routine on paintings is to not have anything in especially if it's an abstract. If it's a spirit painting, the spirits will happen after I get the painting established. On the other things, it's just kind of depends on the box or the wood.
Do you come into the studio every day, or?
I'm here every day.
Certain set hours, or?
Nope. It drives my friends crazy when they try to visit me here because my hours are inconsistent. I usually don't get in until about 10:30, and I'll stay till 5:30. Currently, I've been working on writing some stories, so I spend about a couple hours a day writing, and then the rest of the time I'm working on either instruments or painting. Oh, I also work on my guitar. I managed to get at least 20 minutes to an hour of practice on guitar every day too.
Wow. Renaissance man. So with your writing, have you published any of your stories, or?
I have not published anything. I've sent copies out to friends on email, and they feed back to me whether the stories are coherent or parts they don't understand or that sort of thing. When I was working for the graphic arts manufacturing company, I wrote our manuals, and so I got into technical writing then, and so I had kind of a basis in writing, and carried it over into fantasy short stories. And I had one that 165 pages later was no longer a short story, and it's still going, so evidently it's a novel. I don't know what's going to happen to it. I have one that is kind of interesting and could possibly make a stage play, in that it's based on a blues player from Bangor in 1930 who lives next to an Indian dance ground that's still there. And so there's a blend of blues and powwow music, and a Massine character shows up in the middle of it. So it's kind of an interesting thing, I think.
It does. It sounds really interesting. Look forward to hopefully seeing those in print at some point. So looking back at your career from the time you entered art full time, what do you think was kind of a turning point or fork in the road moment for you?
Probably when I resigned from the graphic arts company and tried a few things unsuccessfully, and decided that if I was ever going to do art as an artist, it was time to do it and start it. That was in 90. And being 69 years old now, I think the decision was a pretty good one. I wish, and on wishing, I wish I maybe had started earlier, but you know, the way life works out, it probably worked out the way it had to work out.
What's been one of the highlights of your career so far?
being married to Dolores, having a son and 2 granddaughters, and having an art career that was, at the very least, semi-successful. I didn't achieve the status that I would have liked, but it's been pretty good. I've had a good life all around anyway. Growing up in Anadarko in the 50s was something too. Every time we have a reunion, we talk about that. It was a pretty cool place.
And there's more of your career to come, hopefully too.
Hopefully.
What's been one of the low points for you?
I don't know that there are any low points. I've had some health issues that haven't made me real happy, but that's one of the hazards of getting older too. Except for the emergency appendectomy, and that had nothing to do with age. It's one of those things that happen. And the reason I'm sitting here talking to you now is I had a brilliant surgeon that saved my life, and so that was both a low point and a high point.
Yeah, blessing to come through that. Is there anything you'd like to add or we've forgotten to mention before we take a look at your work?
You've covered it well.
Okay, well let's take a look at some paintings and hear some more about them. All right, so we're looking at one of your abstracts. You want to tell us a little bit about this piece?
It features the spirit sticks, and they have present the Kiowa sunburst I was talking about a while ago, the color combinations in each one, and they just represent spirit characters flowing up through the painting. I have no idea what the title of this one is.
It's really a nice one though, and again starting with the 2 colors that you mentioned every time you start an abstract.
Yes. In fact, some of the background is in this painting. This is a Prussian blue through the raw sienna color I was talking about right here, and then it fills in from there. This one's called Kachina. Delawares have absolutely nothing to do with Kachinas, but I like them anyway. And this one also features the spirit sticks. The spirit sticks are based on story sticks, and they do have to do with Delaware history. And story sticks are a bundle of sticks that the storyteller could pick up and read like a book because of symbols or colors or markings along the stick that he put there so he could get the story in order whilst telling it. And these really kind of are a spin-off of those.
So those are kind of present in a lot of your work then?
Oh yeah, they're present in
all your
a great
native
deal of my work. They don't always look the same, but they're there.
They'll be there.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, and you want to talk to us
Okay,
about
this is a crow. It's not a raven, it's a crow. I'm a firm believer in totem animals, and this one's mine. Everywhere I've been, I used to travel a lot, even to Germany. I was in Germany one year, there were 6 crows in a tree outside my hotel room. And in New York City, I was running into crows. So crows follow me around. And this is, I would call probably an expressionist painting. The ever-present spirit sticks represent the crow in spirit form.
That's a nice one. I like that. And I forgot if you told me the title or not.
Called The Crow.
The Crow. Okay.
If it needs a title.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today,
Thanks
Jim.
for doing this.